Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei.
Amen.
So into the screen share without further ado. And here we are. Let's make sure we actually are way back up here. There we are. So we were talking about amounts, and of course this parsha of Pekudei takes about the accounts of the tabernacle, and it also, in other words, the amount of gold and the amount of silver, etc., etc. And Rashi's giving us a little bit of a sense of these various weights and measures. And over here on the side, you can see I have some of those ancient weights and measures. So here's where Rashi actually is going to spell out what I have written over here. Kikar, right? Kikar. Shishim maneh. That literally means 60 maneh. Umaneh shel kodesh, but the maneh of the holy, because it says holy, right? Kikar was kaful. It is doubled. In other words, 120 manehs. Let's find a place. Sorry. Kaful haya. Hare hakikar kuf kaf maneh. So he explains that a kikar, which is translated as a talent, right, is 120 maneh. V'hamaneh, and the maneh itself is kaf he slaim, was 25 slaim. And a selah, as I mentioned yesterday, and a shekel are one in the same, all right? Hare kikar shel kodesh, so a holy kikar, shalosh alafim shkalim, that would be 3,000 shekels, right? 120 times 25, right? Times 3. Let's see. No, I'm sorry. So one kikar is 3,000, right? I'm thinking about the other measurements or the other weights, okay? Lefichach, and for this reason, maneh bifrot rut, okay? So he says, a maneh in units, kol hashkalim shepetuchin b'minyanan mishalosh alafim. He's saying that any amount of shekels that is less than a maneh, okay, in other words, is less than 3,000, ein megi'in la kikar. They're not going to equal a kikar. So he's explaining why. Let's take a look at here, okay, why he says that we say that it is in this verse here, verse 24, right? He says why. He says the gold of the free will offering was 9 and 20 talents. In other words, 29 talents. And then we go into shkalim, right? And 700 sheva ma'ot u'shloshim shekel and 30 shekels, because 730 shekels doesn't amount to a talent. So in other words, when you take all the shkalim and you divide it by 3,000, whatever you get, how many talents, right? And then what is the remainder would be stated in shkalim, beshekel hakodesh. So I believe that's simply what Rashi's trying to explain. That while we are in fact going from kikar to shkalim. So we go from this large amount of the So while we go from a kikar to shkalim, and I think he says maneh befrotrot. So he's saying it doesn't go to, maybe what he's trying to deal with is that it doesn't talk about a kikar with leftover manehs, okay, but that we talk about leftover shkalim, and that is because you probably couldn't divide it equally by 25. Although, let me think about this. That's interesting. Yeah, because it is 25. Janet, what's up?
Isn't the count when they do the count of the tribes later,
Yeah,
people, they do it the same way. They do it
yes,
one, then the other, then the other.
right. So the count of the tribe, of course, later is discussing, and we're going to get to it now because we're going to discuss one of those countings regarding the Chatzi shekel, right?
But that is, they break it out the same way. They
Yes,
have
they
that.
do. They do. And we're going to do it right now. You'll see. We're going to read this verse 25. We're going on to verse 25 now. Here we are. V'chesef pekudei ha'eda. So the amount of silver from the enrollment of the community, meaning, and notice this word pekudim again, right? Of the counting, this is the census, right? The silver from the census of the community, right? So we're now talking about the half shekel donations, which we have mentioned before. Me'at kikar, that was 100 talents, 100 talents, ve'elef and 1,000 u'shava ma'ot v'chamisha v'shivim, and 1,775 chamisha v'shivim, 75 shekel b'shekel hakodesh. So, and now he's going to explain to you how that works out. Let me just make sure I'm not leaving anything out. Okay, and here's how he explains, because he's going to explain how this actually gave you the census, or corresponded to the census of males 20 years old and up. Excuse me 1 second, I have to cough. Thank you. And the Torah goes on to explain, Beka the Gulgolet, a Beka to a skull, literally it means. In other words, this to a pole, right? So each individual, a Beka, Machatzit HaShekel, which corresponds to a half shekel, the shekel HaKodesh. L'chol ha'over al ha'pekudim. You notice how this word pekudim shows up quite a bit here in a Torah portion called pekudei, right? So to l'chol ha'over, to everyone who passed through al ha'pekudim on the enrollment, miben esrim shana v'mala, from 20 years old and upwards, the sheish me'ot elef, and now you're going to see to 600,000, Ushloshet alafim, and 3,000 v'chamesh me'ot, and 550. So if you divide that number by 3,000, right? By 6,000, correct? Because it's a half shekel, right? You're going to get the 1,000 talents that is mentioned, and the remainder, okay, again, those are going to remaining bekas according to each person, because each person, each individual, each number here is a beka, a half shekel. So you have to divide that by 2, the remainder, okay? That is and that is the 1,550. You have to divide it by, that's the remainder. So you have to divide that by 2, because each one of those is a half shekel. And that way you'll get the shkalim that are mentioned up here in the previous verse. That's how you work it out. Okay, so let's take a look at the Rashi. So Beka, Hu Shem Mishkal, that is the name of a weight, Shel Machatzit HaShekel, of a half shekel. That's a half shekel weight. L'sheish me'ot elef, for the 600,000, etc. Kach hayu Yisrael. I believe he's saying this was the population of the Israelites, in other words, of males 20 years old and up. The kach Allah minyanam achar shehukam hamishkan. And likewise, it was the same number. We have actually came across a similar Rashi a few weeks ago, right? And this also was their number after the Mishkan was put up, was erected. B'Sefer B'Midbar, and this is mentioned in the book of Numbers. V'af ata, and now as well, B'Nidvat HaMishkan, when it came to the gifts for the construction of the Mishkan, in other words, preceding the construction of the Mishkan, Kach Hayu, that was the same number. Uminyan Chatza'e Hashkalim, and the number of half shekels, Shel Sheish Me'ot Elef, of 300,000, Ole Me'at Kikar, right? You're dividing this 600 half shekels by 600,000 half shekels. You divide it by 6,000, and you're going to get 100 kikar, 100 talents. Kol echad shel shloshet alafim shkalim, right? Every one of the 3,000 shkalim. Okay, all right, let's keep going here. All right, each talent made up of 300 of 3,000 shkalim. Ketzad. So how do we get this? Sheish me'ot elef. So 600,000 chatzaim halves, right? Hare hen shalosh me'ot elef shlamim. That's going to give you 300,000 full shekels. In other words, if we've got 600,000 half shekels, we'll have 300,000 full shekels. Hare me'at kikar, and that is exactly, in other words, 300,000 is 100 talents. V'hashalosh alafim v'chamesh me'ot, and the 3,500 v'chamishim and 50 chatzaim halves, right? He's doing the arithmetic for this. Olim you're going to divide that by 2 to get full shekels, and they amount to elef ushva ma'ot, 1,700 v'chamisha v'shivim and 75 shkalim. So Rashi is spelling out the arithmetic for how you get these amounts. Now let's go on. As I said, if you use the the little thing that shows you're putting up your hand, I will see it, and I'm happy to call on you. All right, so let's go on here. Yep. All right, keep going. Vayhi ma'at kikar hakesef, and the 100 talents of silver, because here we're talking about the silver. Latzeket et adnei hakodesh. It was to mold, I'm going to use that term, the silver, the socket, the holy sockets. The et adnei haparochet, and also the sockets for the parochet. The parochet was the curtain. Me'at adanim, 100 sockets. Le'ma'at hakikar, for the 100 kikar. Kikar la'aden. A kikar, each aden, each socket weighed 1 talent. I'll go back and illustrate what we're talking about in a moment. Let's just keep going a little bit more. Ve'et ha'elef ushva me'ot v'chamisha v'shivim, and the 1,700, 1,775 remain shekels of silver, right? Asa vavim, he made hooks, la'amudim, for the posts. V'tzipa rashehem, and he overlaid their tops, their capitals. V'chishak otam, and he made bands for them. And I'm going to go to a new share and see what I can do. Before I do that, I want to make sure that I can show that to you. Okay, I see what I'm going to have to do. 1 second here. Okay, I'm going to go back to that. That's right there, as a matter of fact. I'm happy to tell you. Oops, here we are. There's the sockets. These are the sockets that we're talking about. Each one, it says 2 sockets per board. And this was the tenon on which the socket would lay. So each one of these was weighed a talent. Just some other pictures of them on the bottom of each board. We're just looking at how each of these boards were then put together. Here we are in silver. So there we are. These are the sockets. Let's see, these are the curtains. And that's so. If you look carefully, you'll see there are posts here that would hold up the curtain. And at the bottom of those posts would have had an aden as well. There were also another, I believe, 5 posts in the front. Just some various views. So you can see, here's the curtain in the front of the tabernacle. I just have a whole bunch of stuff, as you can see. Some of this may be familiar. Let me see if I can find the picture. Okay, here we go. What we were talking about were these posts here, okay? And the tops of them, I can make it a little larger, but it's going to start to become pixelated, right? So there were hooks. If you look very, very carefully, you'll see there was a hook there that held up the curtain. So these curtains were held up by the hooks. It says they were made out of silver, and the tops of the capitals of these here. And here are the bands. Remember, we talked about the bands that were there. So just to illustrate for you what he's talking about, let's go back to the text. Excuse me. So going on, I believe, yeah, okay. Here we go. There is a Rashi on this. Latzeket, it's got the word latzeket, and he says the ketargumo leat. Sorry, le. I'm gonna have to look at the Aramaic, but it looks like, I believe it's la'atacha. So let's take a look and see. Here it is. There's the word, la'atacha, in the Aramaic, and it means to essentially to cast or to smelt. Et adnei hakodesh, the the sacred sockets, shel karshei hamishkan, of the boards of the Mishkan, shehem menchet krashim. We're talking about 48 boards. Ulahem sadik vav adanim. So multiply 48 by 2, because each one of them gets 2 sockets. So you wind up with 96 adanim, 96 sockets. The adnei parochet, and the adnei of the curtain, arba'ah. Remember on those posts I showed you, 4 of them. So 4 plus 96, harei me'ah, you got 100. V'chol sha'ar ha'adanim, and all the other adanim, all the other sockets, because there were other sockets that were cast, nechoshet, ketiv bahem. It mentions that they were made with bronze or brass or copper, however you want to translate nechoshet. Let's see, make sure I have everything here. Did we do this? Yes, we did. So verse 28, v'tzipa rashehem, and he covered the tops of them, the capitals of them, shel amudim, of the posts. You saw those posts that held up the curtains, mehen shebekulam, of them, shebekulam ketiv, because regarding all those posts, it says that tzipar rashehem, he covered I'm trying to think of a better word for that. Let me see if there's one that I have. But basically it means to overlay. Okay, there we go. It says he overlaid their capitals, their heads, b'chashukehem kasif, and their bands with silver. I don't believe it goes on, but I'll double check. No. So let's go back into our chapter here. Okay, here we go. onto now unachoshet hatnufa, and the brass or the bronze of this gift, of this donation that they made. Shiv'im kikar, that was 70 talents, the alpayim, and 2,000, the arba me'ot shekel, and 400 shekels. Vaya'as ba et adnei, and he made from them the sockets, petach ha'oel, the opening of the tent, or moed, or hel moed. So if I were to show you those pictures again, you saw there was a curtain at the front of the tabernacle that was held up, I believe, by 5 posts. Those posts had the sockets of brass. The et mizbach hanechoshet, and the altar made out of brass. The et michbar hanechoshet, and the bronze net, asherlo, which it had. The et kol klei hamizbeach, and all the utensils for the altar. And I can show you a quick picture of that. Oh, sorry, one second. So we'll just go up. This of course, is the altar. Right? This was made out of brass. And here's some of the vessels of the altar. I can try and show you a better picture of it. Excuse me one moment. Yes, I think hopefully it's up here, unless I have to go all the way down again. And I may have to go, I may have gone in the wrong direction. Clearly I did. So let's see if I can go down here. Let me see. One second. I think I know where it is now. Here we no. Oh, one second. That's the ark. Various vessels inside the tabernacle. There it is. There's the altar. And this could be the michbar that he's talking about, right? How large this was. I mean, a person could stand on this edge here. And it could be that this little area here was where the sacrifices were actually made. This also could be a michbar. Hard in some ways. So I'm not sure what this picture, oh, okay. Here's another with the ramp. Okay, and this is the laver, by the way. Remember when I was trying to find pictures, the laver and its stand. Okay. Let's go back to the right here, the adnei hachatzer, and the sockets of the courtyard. So those posts that you saw that were outlining the tabernacle, each one of those posts had a socket of brass. Saviv, roundabout, the et adnei shar hachatzer, and the sockets of the gate of the courtyard. The et kol yitdot hamishkan, and all the pins, right, like tent pins of the mishkan, of the tabernacle, the et kol yitdot chatzer saviv, and all the pins of the courtyard around, because they held that up. Again, I can go see if I can go to the share again, just to show you what I'm talking about. Let's see what I can do here. I have to go up through all these things. Forgive me. We'll get into that. Well, here we are. So you see the pins here to hold it all in place. And even the tabernacle had pins to hold these cloths in place. Okay, you know something? This is a very good place for us to stop.
Well, Rabbi, there's only one more verse for the Aliyah. I know that was the end of a chapter, but there's just one
Right.
more verse, and
Okay, but it would also, okay, I'll leave you to imagine if I don't have time to start illustrated. But at any rate, Umin hatchelik v'hargaman v'tolat hasheni shani. And from the blue, purple, and crimson yarns, asu bigdei srad. He made garments, literally it means of service. And what they're talking about here are the tarps that he used, and Rashi will explain how. The sharet bakodesh, to serve in the sanctuary or in the holy place. V'ya'asu et bigdei hakodesh, and they also made the holy garments asher la'aharon, for Aaron, kasher tziva Hashem et Moshe, just as Hashem had commanded Moses. And there is a Rashi on this. So umin hatchelet v'argaman, it says, and from the blue and the purple, etc. And if you look very carefully at that verse, you'll notice that there's a word missing that we've come to expect when every other time it talked about the blue and the purple and the crimson yarn. It also included shesh, linen. It also talked about linen. Lo ne'emar, it isn't said here, kan, here. Umikan ani omer, and from this I say, and I think Rashi is saying this is his opinion, she'en bigdei srad halalu, that these bigdei srad is what they refer to, are bigdei kuna. They're not the garments of the priests. Shebivigdei kahuna, because when it talks about the garments of the priests, haya shesh, there was, it mentions the linen. Elahem begadim, but these are garments, shemachasim bahem klei hakodesh, with which they covered up the vessels of the holy, the sacred vessels, b'sha'at siluk masaot, at the time when the encampment was taken down to move on. Masaot are the journeys, shelo haya bahem shesh, because in those particular garments there was no linen, and that's where we'll make the marking for next time, which I'm hoping will be Thursday. So we'll actually take this up here. And I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording and hope people found this of interest.